and one can query whether or not it's based in truth. The fact is, at least two independent technical people have released their own assessments, and they're pretty critical of the use of this FBI, Department of Homeland Security, report called Grizzly Step, like the steps of Russia, as a attribution tool. So it's one thing to release a report that says this report is meant to defend your computer network. And in fact, only 3 pages of the 13 or so pages had specific information related to the hacks. Most of it just read like a software security vendor report saying, oh, this is what you do to secure your systems, which is quite a different thing. But instead, the White House had kind of primed the media environment, and the public was waiting for an attribution. And that's not what they got. They got a report that was basically saying, here are some technical things, but we're not going to give you a lot of technical detail. Most of the information was the public anyway, and there's not really any evidence that's been presented to the public that this was commissioned by the Russian government. Now, whether it was done by independent Russian hackers, that's a different story. Obviously, we know, not every government in Australia that is in power is responsible for what every individual Australian citizen does, and similarly in Russia.
Well, just on that point, there's been a lot of discussion about the potential for state-sponsored hacking, particularly via Russia and China. But is it likely that Western democracies are also engaged in this sort of behaviour, sourcing this sort of information via hacking, even if they're not using it in the same way of, leaking it to WikiLeaks?
Sure. We know that, in fact, intelligence agencies do this in Western countries pretty routinely, particularly the U.S., which has said that they routinely, gather this information. We know from revelations of whistleblower Edward Snowden, as well as others, that there are things like the TAO, the Tailored Access Unit in the NSA, that is described as the technical plumbers who come in and unblock when their hackers can't get into a system they want to get into. They call these guys in, and they're like the specialists to get in. So we know that this does actually go on. I think that the issue here that's very interesting is not that there aren't spies in different countries who are eavesdropping, Russian spies in the US spies in Russia, who are not gathering intelligence and sending it back, but rather that this intelligence was made public, that it was actually given to the media and leaked. Now, that's very interesting. Whether or not it's actually been an action of the Russian government, we haven't seen any evidence of that, just allegation for political purposes. But it seems that if you go that route, that's actually the thing that gets you in trouble. So it's okay for the spies to spy on each other and the governments to spy on each other, but it's not okay for the rest of us to know about it.
Dr. Dreyfus, we live in very interesting times. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, last month's US election wasn't just about choosing a new president. Votes were also held on the use of marijuana. 4 more states have chosen to allow recreational use of the drug.
Another 4, including Montana and Florida, approved its use for medical purposes. One Miami resident explains how she'll benefit from the change when it comes to force in the new year.
What would you do for your child? Giselle Delgadillo found herself